Subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that touches your heart. The morning sun painted the palace walls golden as William stood at his post for the first time. His uniform felt stiff against his young shoulders, and his heart hammered inside his chest like a drum. At 20 years old, he had finally achieved his dream of becoming a royal guard. The brass buttons on his coat gleamed, and his boots reflected the marble floors beneath his feet. He tried to stand perfectly still, just like the senior guards had taught him during training. The palace hallways buzzed with activity around him. Servants hurried past carrying trays of breakfast, their footsteps echoing against the high ceilings. Ministers in expensive suits walked by discussing important matters in hushed voices. William kept his eyes forward, his back straight, his face showing no emotion. This was his duty now. This was his purpose. An older guard named Thomas stood beside him at the entrance. Thomas had been serving the royal family for 15 years already. His face showed lines from years of standing in the sun and rain, but his eyes were kind. During their brief break, Thomas leaned closer to William and whispered some advice. "The job looks simple from outside," Thomas said quietly. "People think we just stand here looking pretty in our uniforms. But this work requires something deeper. It requires your heart, your loyalty, and your complete dedication. The royal family trusts us with their safety, with their privacy, with their very lives." William nodded, absorbing every word. He wanted to be the best guard the palace had ever seen. He wanted to make his family proud. His father had been a soldier, and his grandfather before him. Service ran in their blood like a river that never stopped flowing. The first few months tested William in ways he never expected. The long hours made his legs ache. Standing motionless for hours felt like torture for his young body. The weight of the ceremonial sword on his hip created a permanent soreness in his lower back. Some nights he returned to his small room in the guards' quarters and soaked his swollen feet in cold water, wondering if he had made the right choice, but something kept him going. Every morning when he put on his uniform, he felt a sense of pride that washed away all the pain and exhaustion. He was protecting something bigger than himself. He was part of a tradition that stretched back hundreds of years. Guards before him had stood at these same posts, had taken the same oath, had devoted their lives to the same noble cause. The royal family consisted of King Edward, Queen Catherine, and their 3 children. Princess Margaret was the eldest at 16, followed by Prince James at 14, and little Princess Elizabeth, who had just turned 8. William rarely saw them up close during those early days. They moved through the palace like graceful shadows. Always surrounded by advisors and tutors and ladies-in-waiting, one rainy afternoon changed everything for William. He was stationed at the garden entrance when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A child was crying somewhere nearby, and the cries sounded frightened and desperate. Without thinking, William abandoned his post and ran toward the sound. He found Princess Elizabeth trapped behind a fallen tree branch in the garden. The storm had knocked down part of an old oak tree, and the little princess had been playing nearby when it fell. She was not hurt badly, just scratched and terribly scared. Mud covered her expensive dress, and tears streaked down her round cheeks. William carefully lifted the branch and helped her out. He knelt down to her level and spoke gently, asking if she was hurt anywhere. The princess shook her head, still crying. William took out his clean handkerchief and wiped the mud from her face. He told her a funny story about a clumsy guard who once tripped over his own sword during a ceremony. And soon, the little princess was giggling instead of crying. That evening, William expected to be punished for leaving his post. The rules were clear and strict. A guard never abandoned his position, no matter what. He stood before the captain of the guard, ready to accept whatever punishment came his way. But instead of anger, the captain smiled. "The king himself asked me to commend you," the captain said. "You showed good judgment and a kind heart. Those qualities matter just as much as following rules. The princess is safe because you acted quickly. The king wants you to know that he notices such things. He notices the character of the men who protect his family." From that day forward, William felt a deeper connection to his duty. This was not just about standing still and looking impressive in a uniform. This was about truly caring for the people inside these walls. They were not just royalty to him anymore. They were human beings who deserved protection, respect, and genuine concern. Years began to pass, each one building upon the last. William grew from a nervous young guard into a confident protector. He learned the palace inside and out, every hidden passage, every vulnerable entrance, every potential security weakness. He studied the faces of visitors, trained himself to spot suspicious behavior, and developed instincts that served him well. The royal children grew up before his eyes. Princess Margaret became a beautiful young woman preparing for her duties as future queen. Prince James developed into a serious young man interested in military strategy and governance. Princess Elizabeth transformed from that frightened little girl in the garden into a cheerful teenager who always smiled and waved at William when she passed his post. Thomas retired after 25 years of service, and William attended the ceremony honoring his old friend and mentor. He watched Thomas remove his uniform for the last time and wondered if he would serve that long himself. 25 years seemed like an eternity to his younger mind. He could not imagine standing at these posts for that many years through that many seasons. Watching that many sunrises and sunsets from the same palace windows, but William discovered something interesting about time. It moved differently when you loved what you did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Before he fully realized it, William had served 5 years, then 10, then 15. His hair started showing gray at the temples. Lines appeared around his eyes from squinting in the bright sun during outdoor ceremonies. His body still ached sometimes, but now he barely noticed. The pain had become as familiar as an old friend. William celebrated his 20th year of service on a crisp autumn morning. The palace held a small ceremony in his honor, presenting him with a special medal for 2 decades of faithful duty. King Edward himself pinned the medal to William's chest, and the king's hands trembled slightly with age. The king was growing old now, his beard completely white, his steps slower than before. "You have been more than a guard to this family," the king said, his voice carrying across the ceremonial hall. "You have been a constant presence, a trusted protector, and a friend. We sleep peacefully because men like you stand watch through the night." William felt his throat tighten with emotion, but he maintained his professional composure. He bowed deeply and thanked the king with simple words that came from his heart. Later, alone in his room, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of that moment. 20 years. Half his life devoted to this single purpose. He had no wife, no children of his own. The palace had become his home. The royal family had become his family. The younger guards often came to William for advice now. He had become what Thomas once was to him, a mentor and guide. He taught them the technical aspects of their duties, but he also tried to pass along the deeper lessons he had learned. He told them that being a good guard meant more than just physical strength or sharp eyes. It meant patience, dedication, and the ability to find meaning in repetition. "Every day will feel the same," William explained to a nervous new recruit. "You will stand at the same posts, follow the same routines, see the same walls. But if you look closer, you will notice that every day is actually different. The light changes. The seasons change. The people around you change and grow. If you pay attention, if you truly care about what you are protecting, the work never becomes boring." The recruit listened carefully, but William could see doubt in his young eyes. Some lessons could only be learned through experience. Some truths only revealed themselves after years of patient observation. William remembered his own doubts during those first difficult months. He smiled, knowing that this young man would either discover the deeper meaning himself, or he would leave for an easier life elsewhere. Princess Margaret married a foreign prince in a ceremony that brought thousands of visitors to the capital city. William stood at attention for 14 hours straight that day, his legs screaming in protest, sweat dripping down his back despite the formal coat. But when Princess Margaret passed by him on her way to the cathedral, she paused. She looked directly at William and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." That moment made every aching muscle worth it. William realized that she remembered him from all these years. She remembered the guard who had been a constant presence throughout her childhood and teenage years. He was not invisible to her. His service mattered to her. That simple acknowledgement filled his heart with renewed purpose. Prince James joined the military after his 18th birthday, following a tradition for royal sons. During his training, the young prince often sought out William for advice. They would walk through the palace gardens in the evening, and Prince James would ask questions about discipline, about duty, about finding strength when your body wanted to quit. "How do you do it?" the prince asked one evening. "How do you stand there hour after hour, never complaining, never showing weakness?" "I struggle in my training exercises that only last a few hours." "You have done this for more than 20 years. William thought carefully before answering. "Your Highness, I think the secret is not in being strong all the time. The secret is in having a reason to be strong. When I stand at my post, I am not just standing there. I am protecting your family. I am honoring my oath. I am continuing a tradition that gives my life meaning. That purpose makes the physical difficulties easier to bear." Prince James nodded thoughtfully. "So you are saying that meaning creates endurance?" "Exactly," William replied. "A man can endure almost anything if he knows why he is enduring it." The years continued their steady march forward. William turned 40, then 45. His body protested more loudly now. The cold winter mornings made his joints stiff. The summer heat exhausted him faster than it used to, but he refused to slow down or request easier assignments. He took the same challenging posts as the younger guards, determined to prove that experience and dedication could overcome the limitations of age. King Edward's health began to decline. The old king spent more time in his private chambers, receiving doctors and ministers behind closed doors. The whole palace felt the weight of his illness. Servants whispered in corners. Guards exchanged worried glances. Everyone knew that an era was ending. William was assigned to guard the king's private wing during this difficult time. He stood outside the royal bedchamber for long hours, listening to the sounds of coughing and labored breathing from inside. Sometimes he heard Queen Catherine crying softly, trying to muffle her sobs so the king would not hear her distress. One night, very late, the bedchamber door opened. Queen Catherine stood there in her nightgown, her eyes red from crying. She looked at William with an expression of such sadness that his own eyes filled with tears. "He is asking for you," she said quietly. "He wants to speak with you." William's heart jumped in surprise. The king wanted to speak with him. He followed the queen inside, something he had never done in all his years of service. The royal bedchamber was smaller than he had imagined, decorated with simple elegance rather than overwhelming luxury. King Edward lay propped up on pillows, looking impossibly small in the large bed. His face had become gaunt, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were still sharp and focused. He gestured for William to come closer. "Sit," the king commanded weakly. William hesitated. Guards did not sit in the presence of royalty. But the king insisted, so William perched carefully on the edge of a chair beside the bed. "I wanted to thank you personally," the king began, pausing frequently to catch his breath. "You have served my family for so long. You have protected my children, watched them grow, kept them safe. I have noticed your dedication, William. Every day of it." "It has been my honor, Your Majesty," William replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I am dying," the king said bluntly. "We both know this. But I can die peacefully because I know that men like you will continue to protect my family after I am gone. Promise me something, William. Promise me you will watch over them, especially Catherine. She will be lonely without me. She will need the familiar faces around her, the people she trusts." "I promise, Your Majesty," William said firmly. "I will serve your family until my last breath." The king smiled, satisfied. "I believe you. You are a man of your word. That has always been clear." 3 days later, King Edward passed away in his sleep. The palace plunged into official mourning. Black fabric draped every window. Guards wore black armbands. The entire nation grieved for their beloved king. William stood at attention during the funeral ceremony, tears streaming down his face despite his training. He was not crying just for the king. He was crying for the passage of time, for all the years that had flowed past like a river, for the changes that kept coming whether anyone wanted them or not. Prince James became King James at the age of 28. The coronation was a magnificent event that drew royalty from across the world. William stood in his ceremonial uniform, watching the young man he had known since childhood receive the crown. He remembered Prince James as a serious boy who asked endless questions, who struggled with his duties, who sometimes doubted himself. Now that boy was a king, carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. Queen Catherine, the Queen Mother, remained in the palace. She had her own suite of rooms in the West Wing, where she spent her days reading, painting, and receiving visitors. William was often assigned to guard her private quarters. During his breaks, she would sometimes invite him in for tea, breaking all traditional protocols. "We are both old now, William," she would say with a sad smile. "The rules seem less important when you have watched as many years pass as we have. Sit with me. Tell me what you observe in the palace these days." William would sit carefully on the edge of a chair, comfortable with the informality, but unwilling to refuse her request. He would tell her small observations about the staff, about the new guards, about changes in routines. She listened carefully to everything, nodding thoughtfully. "You see so much," she said one afternoon. "Guards are invisible to most people, but that means you see things others miss. You notice when someone is troubled, when relationships are strained, when something is not quite right. That awareness has protected us more times than we probably realize." William thought about her words later that evening. She was right. His years of quiet observation had indeed helped him prevent problems before they became serious. He had noticed suspicious behavior among visitors, had sensed tension between staff members before it exploded into conflict, had spotted security weaknesses that needed addressing. His experience had given him instincts that younger guards had not yet developed. Princess Elizabeth, now in her 30s, remained unmarried. She devoted herself to charitable works, visiting hospitals and orphanages, supporting causes that helped common people. William sometimes accompanied her on these visits as part of her security detail. He watched her interact with sick children and poor families with genuine compassion that never seemed forced or artificial. "You are good at this," William told her during one visit to a children's hospital. Then he quickly added, "Your Highness, forgive me for speaking so informally." She laughed, a sound like silver bells. "William, you have watched me grow up since I was a child. You pulled me out from under that fallen tree when I was 8 years old. I think you have earned the right to speak your mind. And thank you. These visits give my life purpose. We are born into privilege and luxury. The least we can do is use that privilege to help others." William felt deep respect for her. She had grown into exactly the kind of person the kingdom needed, someone who understood that royalty came with responsibilities, not just benefits. The years moved faster now. William reached 30 years of service, then 35. His hair turned completely gray. His back hurt most mornings until he moved around and loosened the stiff muscles. Reading the duty roster required glasses now, something he had resisted for months before finally admitting he needed them. The younger guards sometimes made jokes about the old ones. Not realizing that William could hear them, they called them relics, dinosaurs, people who should have retired years ago. William never responded to these comments. He understood that youth always thinks it knows everything, always believes the old ways are outdated. He had probably thought the same things about older guards when he was 20, but the captain of the guard valued William more than ever. He assigned William to the most sensitive posts, the positions that required judgment and discretion rather than just physical strength. William guarded private meetings where important decisions were made. He stood outside rooms where family conflicts were resolved behind closed doors. He became a repository of palace secrets, a silent witness to the real lives of the royal family. One winter evening, a crisis erupted that tested everything William had learned in his decades of service. An intruder somehow breached the outer security and made it into the palace grounds. Alarms sounded throughout the building. Guards rushed to their emergency positions. The protocol was clear: secure the royal family immediately and hunt down the intruder. William was stationed near Queen Catherine's rooms when the alarm sounded. He immediately went to her door and knocked urgently. When she answered, confused and frightened by the noise, he quickly explained the situation and asked her to lock herself in her bathroom. The most secure room in her suite. Then he heard footsteps running down the hallway toward him. A man appeared, wild-eyed and carrying a knife. He was not dressed like palace staff. His clothes were dirty and torn. He looked desperate, possibly mentally unstable. William stepped into the center of the hallway, blocking the path to Queen Catherine's door. He held no weapon. Guards on interior posts did not carry guns, only ceremonial swords that were rarely drawn. William raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Stop there," William said firmly, but not aggressively. "You do not want to do this. Put down the knife, and we can talk." The man kept advancing, waving the knife wildly. "I need to see the king." "They will not listen to me." "No one listens to the poor people. No one cares." William understood immediately. This was not a trained assassin or a terrorist. This was a desperate, troubled man who felt invisible and powerless. The kind of person who does something extreme just to be noticed, to be heard. "I am listening to you right now," William said calmly, taking a small step forward. "I hear you. Tell me what you need. Tell me what is wrong." The man seemed surprised that someone was actually talking to him rather than just attacking. His knife hand lowered slightly. Behind William, other guards were arriving, but William held up one hand, signaling them to wait. "My family is being evicted," the man sobbed, all his anger suddenly turning to despair. "We have nowhere to go. My children will be on the streets. I tried every official channel. I wrote letters. I waited in lines. No one would help us. I thought if I could just reach the king, if I could just make someone important. Listen." William spoke gently now. "Give me the knife, and I promise you that I will personally deliver your situation to Princess Elizabeth. She handles charitable cases. She will help your family. But you need to put down the knife right now, before anyone gets hurt." The man looked at William for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity. Whatever he saw there convinced him. The knife clattered to the floor. The man collapsed to his knees, weeping. Other guards rushed forward to restrain him, but they were careful not to be rough, following William's lead. Later, after the man had been taken into custody and the crisis was over, King James summoned William to his office. The king looked shaken by the security breach, but also impressed by how William had handled it. "You could have been killed," the king said. "You were unarmed, and he had a knife. You could have waited for backup, but you stepped forward and talked him down. That took tremendous courage." William shrugged slightly. "It seemed like the right thing to do, Your Majesty." He was not evil. He was desperate. Sometimes people just need to be heard, to be seen as human beings rather than problems. "Did you really promise to help his family?" the king asked. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I hope that was not overstepping my authority." The king smiled. "Not at all. In fact, I already spoke with Elizabeth. She is looking into the situation personally. If his story checks out, we will help them. And William, what you did tonight demonstrates exactly why experience matters. A younger guard might have reacted with force. You reacted with wisdom." William's 38th year of service brought unexpected changes. The new captain of the guard, a younger man focused on modernization, began pushing for mandatory retirement ages. He argued that guards over 55 should retire to make room for younger, stronger personnel. The proposal created tension among the older guards who had devoted their lives to service. William said nothing during the debates, but inside he felt a deep sadness. He was now 58 years old. If the new policy passed, he would have less than 2 years remaining before forced retirement. 2 years to end a life's work. 2 years before, he would have to leave the only home he had known for nearly 4 decades. Princess Elizabeth heard about the proposed policy and asked to meet with William privately. They sat in her sitting room, surrounded by paintings and photographs documenting her charity work over the years. "This is wrong," she said firmly. "Guards like you are irreplaceable. You carry institutional knowledge, relationships, instincts that take decades to develop. Pushing you out just because of age is foolish." "Your Highness, perhaps the captain has a point," William said quietly. "I am not as fast as I once was. My eyesight is not as sharp. Maybe it is time for younger men to take over." "Nonsense," Elizabeth replied. You talked down an armed intruder 3 years ago using nothing but calm words and wisdom. No amount of physical strength could have achieved that. The captain is making a mistake, and I intend to tell my brother exactly that. True to her word, Princess Elizabeth lobbied King James to reject the mandatory retirement policy. The king listened to his sister's arguments and ultimately sided with her. The policy was modified to allow guards to continue serving past 55 if they passed annual fitness assessments and if senior leadership believed they remained effective. William passed his assessment easily. Despite his age, he maintained good health through careful diet and regular exercise. His knowledge and experience outweighed any minor physical limitations. He would continue serving as long as his body allowed, but privately, William knew that time was running out. His 40th anniversary of service was approaching. 40 years. An entire lifetime spent at these posts, walking these hallways, protecting these people. The numbers seemed both impossibly large and somehow too small. How had for decades passed so quickly? Queen Catherine's health began to fail. She was now in her late 70s, and the years had finally caught up with her strong spirit. She spent most of her time in bed, receiving visitors for only short periods. William was assigned to her door permanently now, a recognition of their long relationship and her comfort with his presence. Sometimes, late at night, she would call for him to sit with her. She would reminisce about the past, about King Edward, about her children when they were young. William listened to every word, honored that she trusted him with her memories. "I am dying, William," she said one evening, without fear or sadness, just simple acceptance. "I am ready. I have lived a long, full life, but I want you to know something before I go. You have been more than a guard to this family. You have been a constant friend, a steady presence through all our joys and sorrows. Edward was right to trust you. I am grateful you kept your promise to him. It was my privilege, Your Majesty," William said, his voice breaking slightly. "Do not mourn me when I am gone," she instructed gently. "Celebrate instead. Celebrate the fact that we knew each other, that our lives intersected, that we shared this strange journey together. Promise me that." "I promise," William whispered. Queen Catherine passed away peacefully 3 days later. The palace mourned again, and William stood at attention during another royal funeral. But this time, he did not cry. He remembered his promise. He celebrated her life instead of mourning her death. Grateful for every conversation they had shared, Princess Elizabeth took her mother's death especially hard. She withdrew from public life for several months, canceling appearances and charity visits. William was assigned to guard her private wing during this difficult period. He could hear her crying some nights, the sound muffled through the thick doors but still audible to his trained ears. One evening, she opened her door and found William at his post. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair uncombed, wearing a simple robe instead of her usual elegant dresses. "Do you ever get tired of standing there?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes, Your Highness," William admitted honestly, "but not often." "How do you do it? How do you find meaning in such repetitive work, day after day, year after year?" Her question sounded desperate, as if she was really asking about her own life, her own struggles to find meaning after loss. William thought carefully before answering. "I think meaning is not something we find, Your Highness. I think it is something we create through our choices and our commitment. Every day I choose to stand at this post. Every day I choose to honor my oath. Every day I choose to care about the people I protect. Those choices create meaning. The repetition does not diminish it. The repetition strengthens it." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they seemed like healing tears rather than tears of pure grief. "Thank you, William. You always know exactly what to say. I am not wise, Your Highness. I am just old enough to have learned a few things through experience." Oh. She smiled slightly. That is the very definition of wisdom. William's 40th anniversary arrived on a spring morning when flowers bloomed throughout the palace gardens. The entire royal family attended the ceremony honoring his for decades of service. King James presented him with the highest medal available to palace guards, and Princess Elizabeth read a speech she had written herself about William's dedication and character. "There are people in this world who talk about loyalty," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. And then there are people who live loyalty every single day without speaking about it at all. William is the second type. For 40 years, he has stood watch over this family. For 40 years, he has been a constant, steady, reliable presence in our lives. We have grown up under his protection. We have been comforted by his presence during our darkest days. We have been inspired by his example of quiet dedication. William represents the very best of what service means. The assembled guards and staff applauded. William stood at attention, trying to maintain his composure, but tears ran freely down his weathered cheeks. He had never expected such recognition, such public acknowledgement of his life's work. He had always believed that guards were meant to be invisible, that their job was to fade into the background. But looking at the faces around him, seeing the respect and genuine affection in their eyes, William realized that he had not been invisible at all. He had been seen. He had mattered. His life had made a difference, not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through simple consistency and faithfulness day after day. After the ceremony, King James asked William to walk with him through the gardens. They strolled in comfortable silence for a while. Two men who had known each other for decades but rarely had the opportunity to speak casually. "I know you are getting older," the king finally said, "and I know that continuing to serve must be difficult sometimes. If you ever want to retire, to rest after all these years, you have more than earned that right. We would provide you with a generous pension and housing for the rest of your life. You would never have to worry about anything." "Wow." William smiled but shook his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty, but I am not ready to stop yet. This is my life. These posts, these halls, this family, I do not know who I would be without this purpose. Perhaps I will serve until I physically cannot anymore. Perhaps I will die wearing this uniform. But for now, I still have strength. I still have value to offer." "I was hoping you would say that," the king admitted. "This place would not be the same without you." The months following William's 40th anniversary brought a strange mixture of peace and awareness. He continued his duties with the same dedication as always, but he found himself noticing small details he had overlooked for years. The way morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, the sound of birds singing in the garden during early shifts, the smell of fresh flowers that servants placed in hallways each day. It was as if knowing his time was limited made everything more precious, more worthy of attention. William began to think about legacy. What would remain after he was gone? He had no children to carry his name forward. He owned almost nothing of value, having spent his life in palace quarters with few personal possessions. His entire legacy existed in the relationships he had built and the example he had set for younger guards. He started spending more time mentoring the newest recruits. He shared stories from his 4 decades of service, not to brag but to teach important lessons. He told them about the time he talked down an armed intruder with patience and compassion. He explained how understanding people's motivations could be more powerful than any weapon. He emphasized that true strength came from inner character rather than physical prowess. One young guard named David became particularly close to William. David reminded him of himself 40 years earlier, eager and nervous and determined to prove himself worthy. David asked countless questions, and William answered each one with patience. "How do you deal with the loneliness?" David asked one evening during a quiet shift. "I chose this life, and I am proud of it. But sometimes I watch other people with families and normal lives, and I wonder what I am missing." William understood the question deeply. He had asked himself the same thing many times over the years. "I will not lie to you," William said honestly. "There are moments of loneliness. There are times when you wonder if you made the right choice. But I have learned that different lives offer different kinds of fulfillment. I may not have a traditional family, but I have been part of something bigger than myself. I have served a purpose that gave my life meaning. For me, that has been enough. But you must decide for yourself what kind of life you want to live." David nodded thoughtfully. "Did you ever regret your choice?" "Sometimes," William admitted, "but not often, and never for very long. When I think about what my life would have been without this service, I cannot imagine it. This work shaped me into who I am. It taught me patience, loyalty, dedication, and compassion. Would I be a better person if I had lived differently? I do not think so. I think I would simply be a different person, and I like who I have become. Winter came early that year, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. William felt the cold more intensely than ever before. His joints ached despite the warm uniform and heavy coat. Some mornings he needed extra time to work out the stiffness in his back and legs before reporting for duty. But he refused to complain or request easier assignments. During a particularly brutal cold snap, William was stationed at an outdoor post near the main entrance. The wind cut through his coat like knives. His face went numb despite the ceremonial hat that covered most of his head. After 6 hours in the freezing weather, his body began to rebel. His legs trembled. His vision blurred slightly. He felt dizzy and disoriented, but his pride would not let him abandon his post or call for replacement. He stood there, swaying slightly, determined to finish his shift. A younger guard stationed nearby noticed William's condition and quickly called for help. The captain of the guard came immediately and ordered William to go inside and warm up. "I can finish the shift," William protested weakly. "That is an order?" "Not a request," the captain said firmly but kindly. "Your dedication is admirable, but you are risking your health. Go inside. That is not a sign of weakness. That is common sense." William reluctantly went inside to the guard's common room. Other guards helped him out of his frozen coat and brought him hot tea. He sat by the fire, shivering violently as warmth slowly returned to his body. He felt embarrassed, defeated, old. For the first time, his age had truly limited his abilities. He could no longer do everything the younger guards could do. That evening, King James visited William in his quarters, something that had never happened before in 40 years. The king sat down across from William and studied his old friend with concern. "The captain told me what happened today," the king began. "William, you have nothing left to prove? You have served this family faithfully for 40 years. No one questions your dedication or your value, but you must start listening to your body. You must accept that you are not 20 years old anymore." "I know, Your Majesty," William said quietly, staring at his hands. "But accepting limitations feels like failure. It feels like I am giving up." "It is not giving up," the king replied gently. "It is being wise. There are other ways to serve besides standing at outdoor posts in freezing weather. We need your experience, your judgment, your wisdom. Let the younger guards handle the physical demands. You can contribute in other ways that are just as valuable." William looked up, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" "I want you to become the official mentor for all new guards," the king explained. "Train them not just in procedures and protocols, but in the deeper aspects of service. Teach them what it really means to be a royal guard. Pass on everything you have learned in 4 decades. That is a role only you can fill. No one else has your experience or your perspective."
Ow.
The proposal lifted William's spirits considerably. He would not have to retire. He would not have to leave the only life he knew, but he could transition into a role better suited to his age and abilities. He could still contribute, still matter, still have purpose. "I would be honored, Your Majesty," William said, his voice thick with emotion. Over the following months, William threw himself into his new role. He still stood regular shifts, but they were shorter and always indoors. He spent most of his time working with recruits, teaching classes on palace history and protocol, sharing wisdom gained through decades of observation and experience. The young guards loved him. They called him Old William with affection rather than mockery. They sought his advice on everything from duty-related questions to personal problems. He became like a grandfather figure to an entire generation of palace guards. Princess Elizabeth visited him one afternoon in the training room where he was teaching a class. It's about dealing with difficult visitors. She waited until the class ended, then approached him with a warm smile. "I heard about your new role," she said. "It suits you perfectly. You were always meant to be a teacher, William. You have so much knowledge and wisdom to share." "Thank you, Your Highness," William replied. I was worried that reducing my regular shifts would make me less useful. But I am discovering that teaching brings its own kind of fulfillment. You are shaping the future of palace security, Elizabeth pointed out. Every guard you train will carry your lessons forward for years to come. Your influence will extend far beyond your own lifetime. That is a powerful legacy. William had never thought about it that way. But she was right. The guards he trained would serve for decades after he was gone. They would remember his teachings, his example, his stories. Parts of him would live on through them, invisible but real. Spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and blooming flowers. William celebrated his 61st birthday quietly, sharing cake with fellow guards in the common room. He felt good, stronger than he had during that terrible winter. His new schedule allowed him more rest, and the reduced physical demands meant his body could recover properly between shifts. But life had taught William that peace never lasted forever. Change was the only constant, and more changes were coming whether he was ready for them or not. William woke up one morning feeling different. Not sick exactly, but off somehow. His chest felt tight, and breathing required more effort than usual. He dismissed it as nothing serious, perhaps just the remnants of a cold or the effects of aging. He went about his duties as normal, teaching a morning class to new recruits about maintaining composure during emergencies. But by afternoon, the tightness in his chest had worsened. During a break, he sat down heavily in a chair, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature. David, his young protege, noticed immediately and rushed over with concern. "William, you do not look well," David said. "Should I call the palace doctor?" "I am fine," William insisted, but his voice sounded weak, even to his own ears. "Just tired. I will rest for a moment." David ignored him and called for medical help anyway. The palace doctor arrived within minutes, took one look at William, and immediately called for an ambulance. William tried to protest, embarrassed by the fuss, but the doctor was firm. "You are having a heart attack," the doctor said bluntly. "We need to get you to the hospital immediately." The words seemed unreal to William. A heart attack? He had always been healthy, strong, careful about his diet and exercise. How could this be happening? But as the paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher, the pain in his chest intensified, and he knew the doctor was right. The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, urgent voices and medical procedures. William underwent emergency surgery to clear a blocked artery. The doctor said he was lucky. If David had not called for help when he did, William might not have survived. King James, Princess Elizabeth, and several senior palace staff visited William in the hospital over the following days. They brought flowers and cards in genuine concern. William felt overwhelmed by their care and attention. He was just a guard, he kept thinking. Why were they making such a fuss over him? "Because you matter to us," Princess Elizabeth said, when he voiced this thought aloud. "You are not just a guard, William. You are family. You have been part of our lives for 40 years. Do you really not understand how much you mean to us?" William's eyes filled with tears. He had always maintained professional distance, always remembered his place as a servant. But hearing her call him family touched something deep in his heart. Maybe all these years of service had created bonds stronger than professional duty. Maybe love could exist across the boundaries of class and position. The doctors kept him in the hospital for 2 weeks. During that time, William had many hours to think about his life and his future. His body had betrayed him in a fundamental way. He could no longer pretend that he was still young and strong. He could no longer ignore the reality of his aging. When he finally returned to the palace, the captain of the guard and King James were waiting to speak with him. They sat in the king's private office, and William could tell from their expressions that this was a serious conversation. "William," the king began gently, "we need to talk about your future. The doctors have advised that you should not return to any guard duties, even light ones. The stress and physical demands, however minimal, could trigger another heart attack. They recommend complete retirement." William felt his world crumbling. Retirement. The word he had been dreading for years. The end of everything that gave his life structure and meaning. "I understand, Your Majesty," William said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I will collect my things and arrange to leave the palace." "Absolutely not," the king said firmly. "You are not leaving the palace, William. This is your home. We have prepared a cottage for you on the palace grounds near the East Garden. It is yours for as long as you live, rent-free, with a full pension. You will never have to worry about money or housing, and you are welcome to visit the palace any time you wish. You remain part of this family, whether you wear the uniform or not." The generosity and love behind this offer overwhelmed William completely. Tears streamed down his face, and he made no effort to hide them. After 40 years of maintaining professional composure, he finally allowed himself to feel the full depth of his emotions. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." The palace held a formal retirement ceremony a month later. Every guard attended, along with the entire royal family and most of the palace staff. They presented William with medals, certificates, and gifts. But the most meaningful moment came when David, his young protege, spoke on behalf of all the guards William had trained and mentored. "William taught us that being a guard is about more than following orders or standing at posts," David said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "He taught us that true service comes from the heart. He showed us that loyalty means staying faithful, even when things get difficult. He demonstrated that wisdom grows from years of patient observation and genuine care for the people you protect. Every guard in this room is better because of William's example. His legacy will live on through all of us." The guards gave William a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. William stood at attention one last time, tears flowing freely, overwhelmed by the love and respect surrounding him. Princess Elizabeth was the last to speak. Her voice trembled with emotion as she addressed the crowd. 40 years ago, a young man named William began his service to this family. He was just 20 years old, nervous, and eager to prove himself. Over the decades, we watched him grow into one of the finest men any of us have ever known. He protected us, guided us, comforted us during our darkest times. He was there when my father died. He was there when my mother died. He has been the constant presence in our lives through every joy and every sorrow. William once told me that meaning is not something we find, but something we create through our choices and commitment. William, you have created extraordinary meaning through your life of service. You have touched countless lives, including mine. We will never forget you. We will never stop being grateful for your dedication, and we will always consider you family." William tried to respond, but his emotions were too overwhelming. He simply bowed deeply to the royal family, to his fellow guards, to everyone who had shared this journey with him. The retirement cottage was small, but comfortable. With a view of the palace gardens William had walked through for 40 years, he settled into a quiet routine of reading, gardening, and receiving visitors. Young guards often stopped by to ask advice, or just to talk. The royal family visited regularly. William discovered that retirement was not the end he had feared, but rather a different chapter of the same story. One evening, several months into his retirement, William sat in his garden watching the sunset paint the palace walls gold and pink. He thought about the young man he had been at 20, so eager and uncertain. He thought about all the years between then and now, all the moments big and small that had filled his life. Had it been worth it? Had he made the right choice all those years ago? William smiled to himself. Yes, absolutely yes. His life had mattered. He had served something bigger than himself. He had created meaning through loyalty and dedication. He had loved and been loved in return, even if that love was expressed through service rather than conventional family bonds. David visited that evening and found William in the garden. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching darkness slowly replace daylight. "Do you have any regrets?" David asked suddenly. William thought about the question carefully. "Everyone has regrets," he finally said. "Small things they wish they had done differently. But about the big choice, about dedicating my life to service, no regrets at all. This life shaped me into someone I am proud to be. It gave me purpose, dignity, and connections that will last until my final breath. I would make the same choice again without hesitation. I hope I can serve as long and as faithfully as you did," David said quietly. You will find your own path, William assured him. You will make your own choices and create your own meaning. But remember what I taught you. Stay true to your values. Care genuinely about the people you protect. Find meaning in the small daily acts of faithfulness. That is the secret to a life well lived. William passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 63. The entire nation mourned when the news was announced. The royal family held a state funeral for him, an honor rarely given to someone who is not royalty or high nobility. Thousands of people lined the streets as his coffin, draped in the palace colors and covered with flowers, made its final journey. King James gave the eulogy, his voice breaking with genuine grief. William was the best of us, the king said. He showed us what true nobility looks like. Not nobility of birth, but nobility of character. He served faithfully for 40 years, asking nothing in return except the privilege of continuing to serve. His last words to me, just weeks before he died, were these: "Thank you for letting me serve. It was the greatest honor of my life." Those words touched my heart deeply. William thanked us for the privilege of serving, when in truth, we should have been thanking him every single day. The palace will never be the same without him. But his spirit, his example, his legacy will live on forever in these walls and in the hearts of everyone who knew him. William was buried in the palace cemetery, a place reserved for members of the royal family and those who had given extraordinary service to the crown. His gravestone bore a simple inscription that he had requested: William Royal Guard, he served with love. Years passed and new guards came to serve at the palace. But William's story was told to every recruit during their training. His life became legend, an example of what dedicated service truly meant. Guards would sometimes visit his grave and leave flowers, thanking him silently for showing them the way. Princess Elizabeth, now growing old herself, visited William's grave every year on the anniversary of his death. She would sit on the bench nearby and tell him about what was happening in the palace, in the family he had served so faithfully. She would thank him again for his friendship, his protection, his constant presence throughout her life. "You were right, William," she would say softly. "Meaning is something we create through our choices and commitment. You created beautiful meaning with your life. You touched millions of hearts with your simple faithfulness. Your last words continue to inspire people around the world. Thank you for teaching us what true service looks like. Thank you for showing us that an ordinary life, lived with extraordinary dedication, becomes something magnificent. Rest peacefully, dear friend. You earned it." And in the quiet cemetery surrounded by palace walls that had witnessed 40 years of faithful service, William's spirit seemed to smile.